Hello and welcome to today's episode of Platinum Talks Wealth. Emmy-nominated journalist Jennifer Rogers Markwell changed gears in her television career when she realized the need to help women make sense of investing. She regularly hosts educational workshops to empower women and others to take charge of their financial future. Now, join your host, Platinum Wealth Management President Jennifer Rogers Markwell, as she leads us into the world of money memories, money infidelities, and how these can mold our relationship with our personal finances as adults. Let's dive into today's episode.
Hi, and thanks for joining us on today's Platinum Talks Wealth podcast. I'm Jennifer Rogers Markwell, and I'm joined today by Jordan Aspen. Thanks so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so tell us about you, who you are, and why you do what you do.
So my name's Jordan Aspen, like you said, and my husband Paul and I run Civilized Animal Productions, and we have since we got married about 6 years ago. We also together raise our 3 very young kids. We've got a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old right now.
Those are
So-
very young kids.
We stay busy, but we're so blessed to be able to be home full time with our kids, running our business, and we just get to be together all the time.
That's awesome. Well, tell me more about your business.
Absolutely. The core of our business is our project management system. So we love to help big visionaries to take their big idea projects and not get distracted by procrastination, shiny object syndrome, imposter syndrome, but actually see those projects through to the end. So typically, our most favorite projects right now to be working on are events, whether that's an in-person small retreat with like maybe less than a dozen people, or a big virtual event that's a big lead generation type of thing. Either way, we go through and make sure that that project actually gets completed.
From start to finish, it sounds like.
From start to finish, from idea to finished.
So if someone came to you, just so I understand and folks listening understand, with an idea, hey, I want to accomplish this through this type of an event, you would take that idea, set it up, organize it, facilitate the whole thing, whether that be through, social media, through whatever platform potentially, or in-person event, and then wrap it up with a bow.
Yep. At the very beginning, we look at the ideas because there's always multiple ideas swirling around your head, right?
Yeah.
So we look at those ideas and say, okay, which one is going to be the one that actually is seen through to completion and why? And we set those goals up at the beginning, and then I make sure that everyone sticks to those goals as we go through the process, whether that's just working with their team and my team, or whether we bring in other contractors. I also help to make those connections just to make sure that everything gets done.
So give me a little bit of past there. How did you get involved in this? What were you doing before that evolved your journey here?
That's a really good question. The path that really brought me to this point, the transition point was 2020, where events were going online and virtual. And so everyone was flooding the virtual event space. And I learned a methodology to run big virtual events, collaborative type with like a dozen or more speakers coming together for these events. And I learned the methodology, fell in love with it. And then within my community of other people who were doing the same thing and learning from the same people, they needed help because it's a big project. And so I stepped in and started helping them even before we officially did that as a part of our business. Originally, that was my first entrepreneurial endeavor. And just looking at which projects worked and which ended up in the UFO pile, unfinished objects, just looking at the difference, I'm like, oh, with these projects that actually got finished. And I see where I went off track with these other projects. So it's a pattern that I've noticed every successful project goes through, whether you know it or not.
So obviously the question that everyone is wondering, what is, tell me more.
So everyone knows that a project starts with a big idea. After that, there are 3 steps that a project needs to go through. And obviously there are sub-steps underneath that. But to keep it simple, you need to set an intention. You need to be intentional about this project. You need to pick one idea and go with it. And you need to have reasons for picking that one idea. So you write out your goals and establish some kind of North Star that you You have some vision of where finished is and what defines finished. It doesn't have to be super clear at this point, but it has to be clear enough that you know the direction you're going. Because if you just set out heading east and you don't know whether you're going to Miami or New York, you're not going to end up in either location. So we need at least a state. Like what state are you going to? So you set that intention. Then you go into the investment phase. This is when you're investing a lot of your time in this project. You are probably investing money in this project, and you're inviting other people to invest as well, whether that's pre-selling a product that you're creating, selling tickets to an event that's coming up, or whether it's simply asking for people to partner with you on a fun project and just inviting them to invest alongside you. Whatever it is, you're buying supplies, you're doing all of those things. That's the investment stage. Then the last stage is the integration phase. And that's when everything comes together and actually happens. It gels. Once that happens, oftentimes visionaries find themselves cycling back into the idea phase. And so it becomes this cycle. And if you can recognize that this cycle happens, then it can actually be really freeing for visionary types, because we have all of these ideas. We want to work on all of them at once, and then none of them get done. And then it just feels overwhelming, and you feel bad for being a visionary, and you get all up in your head. And if you can realize that this is actually a cycle that can feed itself, you can actually bring something to completion and then have the energy to jump back into that idea, that new idea, the next one. That can help to feed the creative cycle in a way that helps prevent burnout.
So that sounds like a lot, right? Like it sounds like a lot, but clearly your role is more handholding along the way with this whole idea, and then keeping you on that path and that track. Because you had said earlier, like, oh, look, that's shiny. Oh, look over here. This is shiny too. And I think entrepreneurs are guilty. And I can speak from experience, right? There's lots of things going on, and lots of things you're excited about and helping and supporting and trying to make a difference in the world. But at the end of the day, like if you're all over the board, that's not helping anyone.
Exactly. Nothing gets done. If you start pouring into your project, into that investment phase before you've set an intention, you waste a lot of money. You waste a lot of time. So yeah, keeping things in order.
Well, so tying into all of that, right? Like we talk about money here, which I feel like is a perfect transition in. So interesting what you're doing now. And I'm sure that there's some aspects or, seeds that were planted way back when you were younger to get you to the point where you are today. So we like to talk about money memories. And that money memory definably can be different, obviously, for everyone across the board. What would you say your money memory is of the younger version of you that you're open to sharing?
What jumps into my mind is when I was 12 years old, I was learning to sew, and I made myself and my sisters little matching dresses. And I had two little sisters. And so a friend of ours, her mom saw these dresses and said that she had already purchased things to make play dresses, the patterns, the fabric, all the supplies to make play dresses for her daughter, but was never getting around to it. I think she had 6 kids at the time. And then her daughter needed play dresses that were washable, and she had all the supplies. So she asked me if I would make them for her, and she paid me. And that was huge. Entrepreneurship in my life was born, and I have never been able to get away from it since. The potential was just this big idea, and the full execution of it in this first project and this first iteration was just mind-blowing to me. The possibilities were just I was so excited. And I've almost never looked back.
Now, I love that. Like, I love that, because when you ask people, there's a pivotal kind of light bulb that immediately goes off of that exact moment. And that's fantastic. So you had said almost never went off. Are you open to sharing a little bit deeper there?
Yeah, so I almost never looked back. As I went through my teens, I found some pretty decent success. As a seamstress, I found my specialty. I made historically accurate, museum quality accuracy types of garments. And I was finding my niche and trying to find my way, trying to figure out this entrepreneurship thing. And I had sewing mentors, but I didn't really have business mentors. And so the business piece I was really, really struggling with. And there were some money mindset issues coming up for me.
You are listening to the Platinum Talks Wealth podcast.
Hey, it's Jennifer. I wanted to take a quick break to remind you that you are worthy to have a seat at the table when it comes to money and your finances. Both me and my team at Platinum Wealth Management, want to meet you where you are, whether you're starting out, starting over, or have been investing for years. Reach out to us at platinumwealth.net or call us at 775-717-0001. We'd be honored to help.
And now, back to the podcast.
Things like, well, because I was a teen and young adult living at home and my parents weren't, they wanted to encourage my entrepreneurship. And so they told me that I could stay there and have my home office there without paying rent. But that kind of, I don't know, in some ways empowered me, but in other ways kind of backfired because I felt like because I didn't have these bills to pay and I was having so much fun with what I was doing that I wasn't worth paying. And so I was sitting here struggling, not knowing how to make the leap from this scenario to actually making this a business that was sustainable and whether I even wanted to. I had some hangups about, just my value and the value of what I made, especially because it wasn't super practical. It was in the educational field. My dad was an educator and in the field of education, so I saw that a lot. And then, um, I just wasn't sure that this was really the path I wanted to take. And I had been being pursued for an internship at a nonprofit that I had been volunteering for. And so I decided to just lay aside everything entrepreneurial and step into that nonprofit for 18 months and worked half the time I was at a desk and half the time I was traveling and speaking on public stages. And so, well, on stages, small groups, and it was a really interesting job, and it connected me with a lot of people, really increased my communication skills and speaking skills. It was very beneficial, but it was incredibly draining to me. And I left the job completely burnt out to the degree that I told some people that I was living here, told other people I was living there, and ended up just staying with a friend and not telling anyone where I was for a while just to process. Um, and for a few months, just kind of set up my sewing studio again, unsure what I was going to do with it, and started writing a book.
Wow. So what was obviously you got back on track to where you wanted to be in your journey, it sounds like.
Yeah.
What was a pivotal moment in that you were trying to navigate again? You were in kind of a burnout mode, it sounds like.
Yes.
What was the moment that put you back into book writing and passion?
Meeting my husband. At the time, neither one of us was interested in the other, but we met and we started up a writers group. And I was working on this book. I had been writing poetry all the way along and posting it online on my blog. Um, and so I was keeping that up, at least. I was keeping creative. And when I met him, there were multiple layers of things that just came together and became clear of where I wanted my life to go. I was feeling really lost because I had had this vision initially of being an entrepreneur and sewing and expressing myself creatively and making money that way, because what I really wanted was to stay home with my kids after getting married and having them. And by this time, I'm in my 20s and I'm wondering if this is ever going to happen. And so part of it was just letting that out to him before we were dating. That was my vision. And then it coming together, realizing that he had this entrepreneurial vision that he'd been doing on the side and experimenting with, but didn't really know what to do with. I had been studying business while I was working this day job. And so I had a lot more business sense, and that missing piece was there, but I wasn't sure exactly how to put it together. And with him writing, I published a sewing book. That was my first book that I put out there. And things just started coming together to write for other people. I found creative entrepreneurs who needed the skill of writing. I had done it for my business for years. My dad had gifted me a blog when I was 12 because he was a web designer. And so I'd been writing online for a long time. And it all just started coming together and gelling. I found my community online. I found my people in person, including my person. And we got married about 2 years after we met. Um, and merged our businesses and continued writing for fellow entrepreneurs. And that's how we really got into all of the different projects and such, and realizing that no matter what project we were working on, whether it was a writing project, an event project, it was all following this same pattern.
So it came full circle for you. Very cool. We'd like to talk through also financial infidelities. And that could be something that's personal or something that you witnessed from someone else along the way that could be a learning moment for folks that are listening. What's a financial infidelity that you've either experienced yourself or, witnessed that you think folks could learn from?
The biggest one that comes to mind for me is that my husband and I made an investment, a pretty heavy investment, especially for where we were at the time, into a coaching program. And there were certain promises that were outlined both in the sales call and on the sales page and all of this. And they were not fulfilled. And there were just multiple layers of, I guess, infidelity on their part. And processing that has been really big for me on multiple levels when it comes to thinking about money and investments, because on the one hand, yes, we can see where the infidelity was on the other side. And then on our side, okay, where did our responsibility lie in making this decision? And so as a writer, I processed it through writing, and I actually published a 6,000 word case study on the whole situation and everything that happened as a full review of the program. I actually do have friends, one in particular who I'm close enough to that I know more of the details of her experience in the program, and she did really well. She did really well in part because her needs were a little bit different from what was promised. And so that was something interesting to kind of process through in that case study of saying, this is what was provided, this is what was promised. If you need this, then go for it. Go join the program. I don't want to just badmouth somebody for sure. But really finding the honesty there of all of that. But one of the things that I took away from it was that it wasn't a loss. So even though, if you look at the money we invested and what we intended to get out of it, and those don't line up, what we did get out of it that wasn't promised were different relationships. Like I said, I've still got friends who I met through the program. It up-leveled me in a lot of ways, through pain and suffering, which is sometimes how things work, because I really did have to face some of those money mindset and other things that were just up in front of my face and kind of triggered by this whole situation. And I had to face them and actually move through them. So all in all, I can see how, the good came out of it.
So as we start to wrap up the conversation, I always like to ask, what are tips and or tricks that you utilize money in your household?
One of the things that I remember being a part of my dad's life in particular, and then I don't remember exactly who it was, but somebody, a podcast that he listened to or something like that. I heard it articulated, and it was taking money out of the equation when making a decision and asking, okay, is this something that we do need, we do want? And then asking not the question of can we afford it, but how can we afford it? And that has been a huge, huge thing for me, because my husband and I have been through all kinds of financial ups and downs. We lost our home to toxic mold, and everything in it was contaminated. And so we started again from scratch. And so you can imagine what kind of financial uh, pressure we were under and have been under, coming out of that. And so as a result, we've had to look at a lot of things. Like, we literally cannot afford anything. It's it's a question of which bill do we pay? We can't afford any of them. What do we do? And so already having had that switch to not ask, can we afford it? Because the answer was just no. To saying, how can we afford it, has gotten us through.
Fascinating. That's an interesting mindset switch, quite frankly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing, and thank you so much for your time today.
You're very welcome.
And thank you for those of you who are listening or watching, and hopefully you'll join us in the next Platinum Talks Wealth podcast.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, Platinum Talks Wealth, please subscribe and share. For more information about Jennifer Rogers Markwell or Platinum Wealth Management, please visit www.platinumwealth.net. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member of FINRA and SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. The guest speakers and their companies are not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial or Platinum Wealth Management.